Hello, I decided to do another story for you as we can't meet again. So this story is about a woman in the Bible, which is quite unusual. The woman's called Ruth, and it's one of my favourite stories in the whole Bible. But the story starts with a woman called Naomi and her husband Elimelech and their two sons. They lived in Bethlehem, yes, where Jesus was born many years later. And they were poor, but they were hard-working. But Bethlehem had a bad famine, and they were in dire trouble. And so Elimelech said to Naomi, "We need to move to another country where the harvests are better and there is food." So they packed up, and they and their sons travelled to the other side of the Dead Sea, to the country of Moab. And surprisingly they were welcomed there, and the Moabites found them somewhere to live and settled down. And they worked hard, and after many years the boys were old enough to marry, and they each chose a Moabite wife. One of them was called Orpah, and the other one was called Ruth. And they lived together, and things were fine, until one day Elimelech fell ill and subsequently died. And then the two sons became ill, and they also died. And the three women were left all by themselves to mourn. So after this, Naomi said to the two girls, "I'm going back to my home. I'm a foreigner here. I'm going back to Bethlehem on my own to be with my family." But the girls didn't want to leave her. And she said, "No, you stay with your country, in your country, with your people. You can marry again and have families." And eventually she persuaded Orpah to go back to her family. But Ruth said, "No, I will stay with you. I don't want to go back to my family and to worship their gods any longer. Wherever you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." Naomi was amazed by this, and so they packed up and set off to return to Bethlehem. And when they arrived, everybody welcomed them. But they said, "Where are your husband and where are your sons?" And Naomi said, "I no longer have a husband or sons, but I do have a daughter." So it was harvest time in Bethlehem, and there was a good harvest that year. And Naomi said to Ruth, "Go to the field of Boaz, and you can collect wheat." Boaz is my husband's cousin. He's a kind man. So Ruth went to the field of Boaz, and she walked behind the reapers. Now the reapers were reaping with scythes and then bundling the wheat up into bundles. But the poor people were allowed to follow behind them and collect the wheat that they dropped, or from the sides of the field where they hadn't reaped it. And so Ruth spent all day doing that. It was back-breaking work because she had to bend over to see where the wheat was. And it took her a whole day to collect a sackful that would give her enough to take home and grind into flour and make some bread for her and Naomi. So at noon, when the sun was high in the sky, Boaz came to the field to see how it was all going. And he noticed Ruth, and he said to one of the reapers, "Who's that woman there?" And he said, "That's the Moabite woman who has returned with Naomi, your cousin." So Boaz called her over and invited her to have a drink. And he said, "You can drink from my jars of water any time you're thirsty." And Ruth said, "Thank you. Why are you being so kind?" And he said, "Because I've heard how kind you've been to my cousin Naomi. You can collect as much wheat from my field as you need." And Ruth was amazed at his kindness. And then he invited her to come and sit with him and eat. So she sat down with him and his reapers, and she ate his food and had some wine. And after she was full, she took the rest home for Naomi. So the summer was over, and it was harvest time, and they were about to celebrate harvest festival. And Naomi said to Ruth, "Boaz is threshing in his barn today, and by our laws, he can invite you into his house to be his wife. So go and see him and see if he can help you." So Ruth did as Naomi suggested, and she went to Boaz, and he was delighted to see her, because he'd fallen in love with her and wanted to marry her. But first of all, he had to ask a cousin who was more closely related to Naomi for permission. But he gave his permission, and so Boaz and Ruth were married, and Ruth bore a son, and once more Naomi had a family in her house. Okay, so what are we going to do for our activity? There are several things you could do. You could do a painting or a drawing or even a collage of the story. Or it would lend itself really well to a storyboard where you tell the story in 4, 5 or 6 pictures. So here I've done a big bubble print of Ruth's name, and then you could collage it or paint it or decorate it however you like. So that's one other thing you could do. And I chose to do something a bit different. I chose to think of all the words that I could think of which described Ruth. So she was kind, she was hard-working, she was loving, determined, loyal, faithful and brave. And then I decorated them. And you could put sheaves of corn round them, or a map maybe, or anything you like to decorate it. And I look forward to seeing what you've done. Perhaps send me a picture or even a video. So keep safe and enjoy yourselves.